The coffee mug trembled slightly in Sarah's hand as she delivered the news over breakfast. We'd been married for 3 years, and I thought I knew all her tells by now. The way she avoided eye contact, the forced casualness in her voice, something was off. "So, Marcus will be at the gallery opening tonight," she said, picking at her croissant. "I know you were planning to come with me, but maybe it's better if you skip this one. It might be awkward." Marcus, her ex-fiancé, the successful art dealer who'd been part of her life for 5 years before I came into the picture. I'd heard stories about him, how he'd helped launch her career as a painter, how they'd traveled Europe together, how their breakup had been mutual and amicable. That last part always struck me as suspicious. Nothing about love ending is truly amicable. Awkward for whom? I asked, setting down my own mug with deliberate care. Sarah finally looked up, her green eyes meeting mine for just a moment before darting away. "For everyone, David. You know how these art world events are. Lots of schmoozing, inside jokes, people from my old life. Marcus will probably bring clients who knew us as a couple. I just don't want you to feel uncomfortable." There it was, the consideration that felt more like dismissal. In 3 years of marriage, Sarah had never asked me to skip an event. She'd always wanted me by her side, introducing me proudly as her husband, the high school history teacher who kept her grounded when the art world got too pretentious. "I appreciate your concern," I said slowly, watching her face. "But I'm your husband. If your ex is going to be there, that's exactly why I should come. We have nothing to hide." Her jaw tightened. "It's not about hiding anything. It's about being mature and avoiding unnecessary drama. Marcus and I are professionals who occasionally move in the same circles. That's all. Then there shouldn't be any problem with me being there." Sarah stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "You know what? Fine. Come. But don't say I didn't warn you when things get uncomfortable." She left for her studio without kissing me goodbye. That was the second tell. The rest of the day, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Sarah and I had built our relationship on honesty and trust. She told me about Marcus early on, explaining that their relationship had run its course, that they'd wanted different things. He'd been focused on building his gallery empire. She'd wanted to actually create art, not just sell it. Their split had been logical, she'd said. Emotionless, even. But people don't get emotionless about 5-year relationships that end right before a wedding. There's always unfinished business, lingering feelings, or unresolved resentment. I'd accepted Sarah's version because I loved her and because I trusted her. Now, that trust felt shaky. I called my best friend Tom during my lunch break. He taught chemistry at the same high school and had been my sounding board since college. "She told you not to come." Tom's voice carried his trademark skepticism. "Man, that's a red flag the size of Texas. Maybe she really is just trying to avoid awkwardness. Or maybe she's trying to avoid you seeing something you're not supposed to see." His words echoed my own fears. "I'm going tonight," I said. "I have to." "Good. And hey, wear that navy suit. The one that makes you look like you could buy and sell art dealers for breakfast." I smiled despite my anxiety. "Thanks, Tom. That's what friends are for. Call me after and let me know what happens." When I got home that evening, Sarah was already dressed in a stunning black dress that hugged her curves perfectly. Her dark hair was swept up, revealing the elegant line of her neck. She looked like she belonged in a magazine spread, not in our modest suburban home. "You look beautiful," I said honestly. "Thank you," she replied, her voice softer now. "David, about this morning." "It's fine," I interrupted. "Let's just have a good evening." But as I headed upstairs to change, I caught her reflection in the hallway mirror. She was checking her phone with an expression I couldn't quite read. Anticipation? Nervousness? Guilt? Whatever secrets tonight held, I was about to discover them. The Morrison Gallery occupied a converted warehouse in the Arts District, all exposed brick and industrial chic. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see the glittering crowd already in full swing. Designer clothes, champagne flutes, and the kind of affected laughter that signaled people were networking rather than actually enjoying themselves. Sarah's grip on my arm tightened as we approached the entrance. "Remember, just be yourself. Don't try too hard to fit in with these people." It was an odd thing to say. In 3 years, she'd never suggested I didn't belong in her world. But tonight, everything felt off kilter, like we were playing roles in a script I hadn't been given. The moment we stepped inside, I felt the shift in energy. Heads turned. Conversations paused mid-sentence. Sarah's hand slipped from my arm as a woman in a geometric print dress rushed over. "Sarah, darling, we weren't sure you'd make it." The woman air-kissed both of Sarah's cheeks, completely ignoring my existence. "Wouldn't miss it, Patricia," Sarah replied smoothly. "This is my husband, David." Patricia's eyes flicked over me with the interest one might show a piece of unremarkable furniture. "Charming." Then she was already pulling Sarah toward a cluster of people near a massive abstract canvas. "You simply must meet the artist. He's from Berlin, very avant-garde, very now." I followed behind, a satellite in Sarah's orbit. This was familiar territory. I'd attended enough of these events to know the rhythm. But tonight felt different. People weren't just ignoring me, they were actively avoiding eye contact. As if I were an embarrassment, they were all too polite to acknowledge directly. Then I saw him. Marcus Aldrich stood at the center of the gallery like a king holding court. Tall, impeccably dressed in what was probably a $5,000 suit, with silver threading through his dark hair that somehow made him look distinguished rather than old. He had that effortless charisma that some men possess, the kind that makes everyone want to be near them, to bask in their confidence. He was talking to a couple, gesturing toward a painting, clearly in the middle of a sale. But his eyes tracked Sarah's movement across the room with the precision of a predator watching prey. "There he is," I murmured to Sarah. She didn't need to ask who I meant. Her back straightened, and she fixed a bright smile on her face that didn't reach her eyes. "Let's just enjoy the art. We don't need to talk to him." But fate, or Marcus, had other plans. Within minutes, he'd concluded his conversation and was making his way toward us with the inevitability of a storm rolling in. "Sarah." His voice was warm, intimate, as if they were the only two people in the room. "You look absolutely radiant." "Hello, Marcus." Sarah's voice was carefully neutral. "This is my husband, David. David, Marcus Aldrich." Marcus turned to me, and I saw the calculation in his eyes. Measuring, assessing, dismissing. His handshake was firm, just a fraction too hard, the grip of a man establishing dominance. "The teacher," he said, making my profession sound like a quaint hobby. "Sarah's told me about you. Funny, she hasn't mentioned talking to you recently." The smile on Marcus's face never wavered, but something cold flashed in his eyes. "We're in the same industry. We run into each other at these things. Professional courtesy, you understand." "David," Sarah interjected, her voice carrying a warning, "Marcus has been very helpful with some gallery connections for my upcoming show." This was news to me. "Your upcoming show? I thought you were still in negotiations with the Brennan Gallery." "That fell through," Sarah said quickly. "Marcus has been helping me find alternative venues." "Just doing what I can for a talented artist," Marcus said smoothly. "Sarah's work deserves to be seen by the right people. People who understand its value." The implication hung in the air. "Unlike you." I was about to respond when a stunning blonde woman appeared at Marcus's elbow. She couldn't have been more than 25, and her hand rested possessively on his arm. "Marcus, darling, you promised to introduce me to the Hendersons," she purred, then seemed to notice Sarah for the first time. "Oh, hello. Vanessa, this is Sarah Winters and her husband, David. Sarah and I are old friends." The look that passed between Sarah and Marcus at the word friends told me everything I needed to know. Whatever they'd been, whatever they were now, it wasn't as simple as professional courtesy. Vanessa's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose slightly. "Winters. But I thought," she caught herself, smiled brightly. "Lovely to meet you both." As they walked away, I caught Marcus glancing back at Sarah. It wasn't the look of a man at peace with a past relationship. It was the look of a man who believed something still belonged to him. "What did you think she was going to say?" I asked Sarah quietly. "What?" "Nothing. She's just confused. These young socialites always are." But I'd caught it, that moment of panic in Sarah's eyes when Vanessa had started to speak. Something was very wrong here, and I was determined to find out what. "I need some air," Sarah announced suddenly. "It's stuffy in here." "I'll come with you." "No," she said too quickly. "Just give me a few minutes alone. Please." She hurried toward a side door before I could protest. I stood there, champagne in hand, surrounded by strangers who all seemed to know something I didn't. The feeling of being an outsider in my own marriage was suffocating. That's when I noticed the woman watching me from across the room. She was older, maybe 60, elegantly dressed with sharp, intelligent eyes. When our gazes met, she raised her glass in a small salute and began walking toward me with purposeful strides. "You must be David," she said as she approached. "I'm Helen Cortez. I own the gallery next to Marcus's." She looked toward the door where Sarah had disappeared, then back at me. "We should talk." Helen Cortez guided me to a quieter corner of the gallery, away from the main crowd but with a clear view of both the entrance and the side door Sarah had escaped through. Her movements were deliberate, practiced. This was a woman who understood positioning and advantage. "I don't usually involve myself in other people's personal affairs," she began, her dark eyes studying my face. "But I've watched this situation develop over the past 6 months, and I can't, in good conscience, stay silent anymore." My heart hammered in my chest. 6 months. What situation? Helen took a sip of her champagne, weighing her words. "How much has Sarah told you about her dealings with Marcus?" "She said he's been helping her find gallery space for her show. The Brennan Gallery deal fell through." A sad smile crossed Helen's face. "The Brennan Gallery deal never fell through, David. Sarah withdrew from it." The words hit me like a physical blow. Why would she do that? She was so excited about that opportunity. "Because Marcus asked her to." Helen's voice was gentle but firm. "I was there when it happened. We were at an industry dinner about 4 months ago. Marcus cornered her near the coat check. I couldn't hear everything, but I heard enough. He told her he was opening a second gallery location and wanted her to be his premier artist. Exclusive representation. Exclusive. I felt my world tilting. But Sarah values her independence. She's always said she'd never tie herself to a single gallery. She said no at first, Helen continued. I was proud of her. But then Marcus said something that made her go pale. She agreed to meet with him privately to discuss terms. That was February. 4 months ago. I thought back to that time. Sarah had been distracted, claiming she was stressed about the Brennan show. She'd spent more evenings in her studio, taken several day trips to visit galleries, she'd said. Had those trips been meetings with Marcus? Why are you telling me this? I asked, though I was grateful for her honesty. Because I know what Marcus Aldrich does to people, Helen said, her voice hardening. He's brilliant at finding artists on the cusp of success and binding them to him in ways that go beyond business. He did it to 3 of my former artists. By the time they realized what they'd agreed to, they were trapped in contracts that gave him control over their careers and a percentage of their sales for years. That's just business, though. Unethical maybe, but not. It's never just business with Marcus, Helen interrupted. He collects beautiful things, art, artists, people. He doesn't let go easily. And Sarah. She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. Sarah isn't just another artist to him. She got away once. Men like Marcus don't forget that. Before I could process this information, I saw Sarah emerge from the side door. She looked composed now, but her lipstick had been refreshed and she'd clearly been making calls. Her phone was still in her hand. Thank you for telling me, I said to Helen quickly. There's more, she said urgently. The contract Sarah signed with Marcus. But Sarah had spotted us and was making her way over, her expression unreadable. Making friends? Sarah asked, her tone light but her eyes wary. Helen was just telling me about the gallery business, I said smoothly. Fascinating world. Indeed it is, Helen agreed, matching my tone. Sarah, that new piece of yours that Marcus has been showing to select clients, the one with the crimson undertones, it's remarkable. I hope we'll see it publicly soon. Something passed over Sarah's face, surprise, then anger, quickly masked. I don't know what you're talking about. I haven't given Marcus any new pieces. My mistake, Helen said, but her eyes told me it wasn't a mistake at all. I must have misheard. If you'll excuse me, I see someone I need to speak with. As Helen walked away, Sarah turned to me. What did she say to you? Just gallery talk, like I said. Why? Is there something you think she might have told me? Of course not. She's just a gossip. This industry is full of them. Sarah's phone buzzed, and she glanced at it quickly before silencing it. We should probably go soon. I'm getting a headache. We just got here an hour ago. Don't you want to network? Isn't that why we came? I've done enough networking for tonight. I was about to argue when Marcus appeared again, this time without Vanessa. Sarah, I need to speak with you privately. It's important. Whatever you need to say, you can say it in front of my husband, Sarah replied, but I heard the uncertainty in her voice. Marcus's jaw tightened. Very well. The Rothstein collection wants to see your new work. All of it. They're prepared to make an offer sight unseen based on the pieces I've shown them. But we need to move quickly, they're leaving for Tokyo in 3 days. Sarah's face went pale. Marcus, I told you I needed more time. Time is a luxury you don't have. This is the opportunity we've been working toward. The opportunity you signed the contract for. What contract? I interjected, my voice sharper than I intended. Marcus looked at me as if he'd forgotten I was there. The representation agreement. Standard gallery practice. I'd like to see this contract. That's between Marcus and me, Sarah said quickly. It's business, David. You don't need to worry about it. But I was worrying about it. I was worrying about a lot of things. What new work is he talking about? You haven't mentioned any new pieces. Sarah's mouth opened, then closed. In that moment of hesitation, I saw everything I needed to know. She'd been keeping secrets, meeting with Marcus, creating art I knew nothing about, signing contracts she hadn't discussed with me. David, can we please not do this here? Her voice was pleading. Then where? When? You've been lying to me for months, haven't you? I haven't been lying. Omission is lying, Sarah. Several heads turned in our direction. Marcus placed a hand on Sarah's shoulder, proprietary and intimate. Perhaps we should take this somewhere more private. Don't touch my wife, I said, my voice low and dangerous. Marcus withdrew his hand but stepped closer to Sarah. Your wife is a grown woman who can make her own decisions about her career. Just because you don't understand the art world doesn't mean you get to sabotage her success. Success? Is that what you call it? Trapping her in some contract, isolating her from other opportunities, making her hide her work from her own husband. David, that's not what's happening, Sarah protested, but her voice lacked conviction. Then explain it to me. Right now. What exactly is in this contract? Why are you creating new work in secret? And why the hell did Marcus feel the need to keep you away from me tonight? Sarah's phone buzzed again. This time, when she looked at it, all color drained from her face. I need to take this. She hurried away before I could stop her, leaving me alone with Marcus. You're out of your depth, Marcus said quietly, all pretense of civility gone. Sarah is an extraordinary artist who deserves to be with people who understand her potential. You're just a teacher, David. A nice, stable, boring teacher who can't give her the life she deserves. And you can. I already did once. I could again. His smile was predatory. Ask yourself why she's really here tonight. Ask yourself why she didn't want you to come. Some truths are better left undiscovered. He walked away, leaving me standing there with a growing sense of dread. Through the crowd, I could see Sarah outside on the gallery's small balcony, phone pressed to her ear, her free hand covering her mouth in what looked like shock or dismay. I headed for the balcony, pushing through the crowd. Whatever was happening, whatever secrets Sarah had been keeping, it was time for the truth to come out. I stepped onto the balcony just as Sarah ended her call, her hand trembling as she lowered the phone. The cool night air carried the distant sounds of traffic, but here, for floors above the city, it felt like we were suspended in our own private moment of reckoning. Sarah. My voice made her flinch. She hadn't heard me come out. She turned, and I saw tears tracking through her carefully applied makeup. Real tears, not the careful emotional displays I'd seen her use at gallery openings when discussing her vulnerable art. These were tears of fear. David, her voice broke. That was my lawyer. Your lawyer? Why would your lawyer be calling you at 9 o'clock at night? She slumped against the railing, the fight going out of her. Because I asked him to review the contract I signed with Marcus. I wanted to get out of it, but... She looked at me with something close to desperation. David, I've made a terrible mistake. Finally, the truth. But instead of satisfaction, I felt only a deep sense of loss. Tell me everything. From the beginning. Sarah took a shaky breath. Last February, I ran into Marcus at the Brennan Gallery preview. It wasn't an accident. He'd found out I had a show there and came specifically to see me. He told me he'd made a mistake letting me go, that he'd spent 5 years regretting it, that seeing my success had made him realize I was the one. And you believed him? No. At first, I told him I was married, that I'd moved on, that whatever we'd had was in the past. She wrapped her arms around herself. But he was persistent. He started showing up at my studio, sending flowers, calling with gallery opportunities. He wore me down, David. Not romantically, I never cheated on you, I swear, but professionally. He knew exactly which buttons to push. The Brennan Gallery. Yes. She nodded miserably. He convinced me that their venue was too small, too safe. That I deserved a bigger stage. He promised me an exclusive show at his new gallery, international buyers, representation at Art Basel. Everything I'd ever dreamed of. So you signed his contract without reading it? I read it. Or I thought I did. But there were clauses buried in the legal language that my lawyer just explained to me. She was crying harder now. Marcus doesn't just represent me, David. He owns the rights to any work I create for the next 5 years. He gets 60% of all sales, and if I try to break the contract, I owe him $2 million. The number hit me like a punch to the gut. $2 million? Sarah, we don't have that kind of money. I know. Her voice rose in panic. That's why I've been so stressed, why I've been avoiding telling you. I thought I could find a way out, but every lawyer I've consulted says the contract is ironclad. And now Marcus is pressuring me to produce more work, better work, and I can't create when I feel like this, trapped and manipulated and... Wait. Something she'd said earlier clicked into place. Helen mentioned that Marcus has been showing your new work to select clients. The pieces with crimson undertones. Sarah's face crumpled. Those aren't my pieces, David. They are forgeries. What? Marcus commissioned another artist to create paintings in my style. He's been passing them off as mine to build hype, to drive up the prices before my official debut at his new gallery. She laughed bitterly. I only found out 2 weeks ago when one of his assistants accidentally sent me photos asking for my approval on the color matching. When I confronted Marcus, he said it was standard practice, that all the major artists have pieces produced by their studios. But you don't have a studio. You paint every piece yourself. Exactly. And when I told him I wouldn't participate in fraud, he reminded me about the contract. About the $2 million penalty. He said if I tried to expose him, he'd sue me into oblivion and make sure no gallery would ever touch my work again. She looked at me with haunted eyes. I've been painting like crazy, trying to produce enough legitimate work to satisfy him, hoping I could somehow fix this before you found out. That's why I didn't want you here tonight. I thought if I could just keep pretending everything was normal, I could find a solution. I moved to her side, and despite my anger and hurt, I put my arm around her. She was still my wife, and she was clearly terrified. Why didn't you just tell me? Because I was ashamed, she sobbed into my shoulder. Because I knew you'd been right all along, that Marcus was manipulative and dangerous, and I'd walked right into his trap anyway. Because I'm supposed to be this smart, independent artist, and instead I got played like a complete fool. We stood there for a long moment, the weight of her confession settling between us. I was angry, furious, actually, but I was also calculating. Because one thing Sarah didn't know, one thing I'd never told her because it had never seemed relevant, was that before I became a high school history teacher, I'd spent 2 years in law school. I dropped out when I realized I hated the cutthroat nature of corporate law, but I'd learned enough to understand contracts, liability, and fraud. And what Marcus Aldrich was doing wasn't just unethical, it was illegal. Sarah, look at me. I gently turned her to face me. How many forged paintings has Marcus sold under your name? I don't know exactly. At least 6, maybe more. And you have proof? The emails from his assistant. Yes, I saved everything. But David, if I try to use that, he'll destroy me financially. Let me worry about that. An idea was forming, risky but potentially perfect. Marcus thinks he has all the power because he has money and connections and a contract. But he's made mistakes. Big ones. What do you mean? Art fraud is a federal crime, Sarah. By selling forged paintings attributed to you without your knowledge or consent, Marcus isn't just breaching a contract, he's committing fraud against the buyers. And you're not the perpetrator, you're a victim. Your testimony could bring down his entire operation. Hope flickered in her eyes. But the contract. A contract signed under false pretenses can be voided. And if Marcus was already planning this forgery scheme when you signed, which it sounds like he was, that's fraud in the inducement. You never would have signed if you'd known he intended to forge your work. Are you sure? I'm not a lawyer anymore, but I know enough. We need to document everything, get copies of all communications, find out who the buyers are. I was thinking fast now, planning, and we need to do something Marcus won't expect. What? I smiled grimly. We need to tell him exactly what we know. Tonight. In front of witnesses. Sarah's eyes widened. David, that's insane. He'll panic. Powerful men like Marcus are used to operating in shadows. Expose them to light, and they make mistakes. I pulled out my phone. First, forward me all those emails from his assistant. Then call your lawyer back and tell him to be ready to file for an emergency injunction first thing Monday morning. An injunction for what? To freeze all sales of artwork attributed to you until authentication can be verified. If Marcus has been forging your work, he's probably done it to other artists too. Once we start pulling that thread, his whole empire could unravel. For the first time that evening, I saw real hope on Sarah's face. You'd do this for me, after I lied to you. You're my wife. I'm furious with you for not trusting me enough to tell me the truth. We're going to have a long talk about that later. But right now, we have a fraudster to catch. I looked through the balcony doors at Marcus, who was laughing with a group of collectors, completely confident in his control over the situation. Besides, I really don't like being told I'm not good enough to understand the art world. Sarah managed a watery laugh. What do? We go back in there. You're going to introduce me to everyone Marcus has been courting with your work. I'm going to start asking very specific questions about provenance, authentication, and recent purchases. And we're going to watch Marcus scramble. He'll know something's wrong. Good. Let him know. Let him wonder how much we know and what we're planning. I kissed her forehead. By Monday morning, you're going to be free of him. I promise. As we headed back inside, I saw Helen Cortez watching us from across the gallery. When she caught my eye, I gave her a subtle nod. She smiled and raised her glass again, this time in what looked like approval. Marcus was going to learn that sometimes the boring high school teacher is exactly who you should be afraid of. 20 minutes later, I stood in the center of the Morrison Gallery, surrounded by some of the most influential art collectors on the East Coast, and delivered my carefully prepared opening line. "I'm so glad to finally meet the people who appreciate my wife's work," I said warmly to the Hendersons. The elderly couple Marcus had been courting all evening. "Tell me, which piece did you acquire? Sarah's been so secretive about her recent sales." Mrs. Henderson beamed. "The one with the crimson sunset over the water." Marcus assured us it was one of her most personal pieces, painted during a difficult period of self-reflection. I felt Sarah tense beside me. That was one of the forgeries. "How fascinating," I continued smoothly. "Sarah, didn't you paint that piece in February? Right after we got back from our anniversary trip to the mountains?" I looked at the Hendersons with calculated confusion. Although I don't remember there being any water where we stayed. Just snow and pine trees. Sarah caught on quickly. "Actually, David, I think you're remembering wrong. That painting," she paused dramatically. "Wait, Mrs. Henderson, could you describe the piece to me? I've completed so many lately, I want to make sure we're talking about the same one." As Mrs. Henderson enthusiastically detailed the painting, Sarah's face grew increasingly troubled. "But I never painted anything like that," she said, loud enough for nearby conversations to pause. "The color palette is wrong, the technique is wrong." "Sarah," Marcus's voice cut through the gathering crowd, sharp with warning. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately." "No." Sarah's voice was stronger now, bolstered by my presence beside her. "I think we should discuss this right here. Mrs. Henderson, when exactly did you purchase this painting?" "Last month. Marcus said it was fresh from your studio." "My studio?" Sarah turned to look at Marcus, who had gone very still. "The studio you've never visited? The studio whose location I specifically never gave you?" The crowd was fully attentive now, sensing drama. Helen Cortez moved closer, her phone subtly positioned as if she might be recording. "This is hardly the time or place," Marcus began. "Actually, it's the perfect time and place," I interrupted. "Because I think there are several other people here tonight who've purchased Sarah Winter's originals that Sarah herself has never seen. Isn't that right, Marcus?" Marcus's composure finally cracked. "You have no idea what you're doing." "Don't I?" I pulled out my phone, which Sarah had forwarded her evidence to during our conversation on the balcony. "I have emails from your assistant, Dmitry Volkov, asking Sarah to approve color corrections on paintings. Paintings that Sarah never created. Paintings that you commissioned from another artist to forge Sarah's signature style." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Mrs. Henderson looked horrified. "Marcus, is this true?" "It's a misunderstanding," Marcus started, but Helen Cortez stepped forward. "It's not a misunderstanding," Helen said clearly. "I've suspected Marcus of similar practices for years. 3 of my former artists signed exclusive deals with him, and shortly after, I started seeing works attributed to them that didn't match their actual style or technique. When I tried to investigate, Marcus threatened legal action." "Helen, you bitter," Marcus caught himself, but the damage was done. His mask of civility was slipping, revealing the calculating predator beneath. "There's more," Sarah said, her voice growing stronger. "Marcus didn't just forge my work. He trapped me in a contract that gives him 60% of my sales and charges me $2 million if I try to break it. He's been using that threat to keep me quiet about the forgeries." "That's a legitimate representation agreement." Marcus protested. "You signed it willingly." "Under false pretenses," I countered. "You never disclosed your intention to commission forged works. That's fraud in the inducement, which makes the contract voidable. But more importantly, what you've done is federal art fraud. You've sold forged paintings to collectors, misrepresenting their authenticity and origin. That's a crime, Marcus." The color drained from Marcus's face. Around us, collectors were pulling out their phones, some recording, others likely calling their lawyers. "The Rothstein collection," a distinguished man in his 60s said from the back of the crowd. I represent them. We were about to make a significant purchase based on Marcus's representations about Ms. Winters's work. I think we need to halt those negotiations immediately. Everyone, please, let's remain calm, Marcus said, but his voice had lost its authority. Sweat beaded on his forehead. These are serious accusations that I'm prepared to prove, Sarah finished. I have documentation of every communication, every piece he claimed was mine that I never created, every manipulation and threat. And as of Monday morning, my lawyer will be filing for an emergency injunction to freeze all sales of work attributed to me until proper authentication can be conducted. You can't do that, Marcus said, his voice rising. The contract is void, I said firmly. And if you try to enforce it, we'll countersue for fraud, emotional distress, and damage to Sarah's reputation. I may be just a high school teacher, Marcus, but I spent 2 years in law school before I decided I actually wanted to help people rather than exploit them. I know exactly how to dismantle everything you've built. Marcus looked around at the crowd of collectors, influencers, and gallery owners who were his bread and butter. I could see him calculating, trying to find a way out, but we'd boxed him in perfectly. If he admitted to the forgeries, he was confessing to federal crimes. If he denied them, he looked guilty and foolish. If he threatened us, he'd only make things worse in front of witnesses. Vanessa, he called out, looking for his date, but the young blonde was already edging toward the exit, clearly smart enough to abandon a sinking ship. It's over, Marcus, Helen said with quiet satisfaction. I've already contacted the FBI's art crime team. They've been building a case against you for months, but they needed someone willing to testify. I think they just found their witness. The look Marcus gave Sarah was pure hatred. You'll never work in this industry again. I'll make sure. You'll make sure of nothing, I said, stepping between them. You have no power here anymore. Your reputation is destroyed. Your gallery will be under investigation. And if you come near my wife again, I'll make sure every single one of your fraudulent sales is prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Security was moving through the crowd now, responding to the commotion. Marcus looked around wildly, realizing he was trapped. This isn't over, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Yes, Sarah said quietly, it is. As security escorted Marcus out, ostensibly to calm down but really to prevent him from fleeing, the gallery erupted in chaos. Collectors demanded authentication of their purchases. Gallery owners called their lawyers. Social media posts were already going up, the art world's gossip machine moving at light speed. Helen appeared at our side. Well played, she said admiringly. I've been trying to catch him for years. Thank you for the warning, I told her. And for having our backs. Thanks, Sarah. She's the one who had the courage to stand up to him. Helen looked at my wife with genuine respect. You know, I have a space opening up in my gallery next month. Nothing exclusive, no predatory contracts, just a standard 40/60th split with full creative control remaining with the artist. Interested? Sarah looked at me, tears in her eyes but hope on her face. What do you think? I think you should take it, I said, pulling her close. But first, we're going home. We have a lot to talk about. As we left the gallery, Sarah stopped me on the street. David, I'm so sorry. For lying, for not trusting you, for putting us in this position. We'll work through it, I said honestly. I'm hurt and angry, and it's going to take time to rebuild that trust. But you're my wife, and I love you. We're a team, remember? She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I'll never make that mistake again. I promise. I know. I kissed her forehead. But Sarah, next time someone tells you your husband is too boring to understand something, please remember that boring people have their uses. We teach history, which means we know all about how empires fall. She laughed through her tears. You're not boring. You're perfect. Not perfect. Just stubborn enough to show up when I'm told to stay home. 3 months later, Sarah's show at Helen's Gallery opened to critical acclaim. The reviews praised her authentic voice and uncompromising vision. Marcus Aldrich was facing federal fraud charges, and 6 other artists had come forward with similar stories of manipulation and forged works. The Brennan Gallery reached out to Sarah, apologizing for the timing of their original offer and proposing a new show for the following year. Sarah politely declined, happy with her arrangement with Helen and determined never to tie herself exclusively to any single venue again. As for us, we started couples therapy. The trust didn't return overnight. It took months of difficult conversations, tears, and hard work. But we were committed to each other, and that made all the difference. I kept teaching history to teenagers who mostly didn't care, but I did it with a new appreciation for the subject. History, after all, teaches us that the most dangerous people are those who underestimate the power of ordinary individuals. The teachers, the artists, the people who show up when they're told to stay home. And sometimes, the most important lesson you can teach is that you don't need to be the richest or most powerful person in the room. You just need to be the one brave enough to tell the truth. As I stood at Sarah's gallery opening, watching her laugh with collectors who genuinely appreciated her real work, I felt someone tap my shoulder. It was Tom, my best friend, holding 2 glasses of champagne. "So," he said with a grin, "how does it feel to be married to the art world's newest sensation?" I looked at Sarah, radiant in her success, finally free to create on her own terms. "It feels like justice," I said. "And it feels like home." Because in the end, that's what marriage is. Not just the good times, but weathering the storms together, fighting for each other even when it's hard, and choosing partnership over pride. Marcus had been right about one thing: I was just a teacher. But he'd been wrong about everything else. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is show up for the people you love, stand your ground, and refuse to let the bullies win. And that's a lesson worth teaching.